right, and people will be starting to come on as we go ahead. I think a lot of people have gotten, according to Abby, a lot of Zoom fatigue. So we may have not as many as we expected, but it's quality, not quantity.
Yes, ma'am. We'll give them a good presentation, and I think some tangible takeaways that they can use for sure.
Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right, John, take it away.
Yeah, well, it is such a joy to be able to introduce Colby to you guys. I'm going to read just a couple of things because I think it's relevant to what he is going to share about, to his credibility. But then I'm just going to share off the cuff just for, 12, 13 minutes or so in introducing him. Not really. But I think I'm not sure any of us really realizes what a treat it is that we get to have him join us. And he's very much accomplished in his own world and life, and author of several books. I'm sure hopefully we'll get, we'll have a one-pager sent out so you guys can see some of this, but has written just for a number of outlets, including currently a member of Forbes Coaches Council. So weighs in quite a bit. If you ever follow Forbes on any platforms, LinkedIn, you can find some of the content that he's put out there, the Washington Times as well. But has spoken internationally. Not sure how we were able to find a break in his schedule to get him here today, but he currently serves as the director of Middle Tennessee State University's Center for Student Coaching and Success. He's a member of the Honors College faculty. He's certified in Harrison Assessments and the EQI 2.0. Dr. Jubenville was selected by the Nashville Business Journal as a member of the 40 Under 40, selected by the YP Nashville as its Impact Award winner just a few years ago. Recognizes leaders who have made a significant impact on Nashville and surrounding communities' youth. He's a distinguished alumni award winner by St. Paul School in Mobile. Mobile has schools there?
One of the best. One of the best. A.J. McCary and Jay Coker graduated from my high school, but we can talk about that later if you want to.
That's right. And I could say has truly been one of the most impactful people in my life as a mentor and coach and friend. And probably one of the things I wrote down, one of the first things I thought about is I've probably had some of the more vulnerable, honest, and valuable conversations in my whole life with Colby. And so my hope is today that you guys will get a little piece of that. And I've seen his passion and what he does and what you'll hear today pay dividends in his own life and his work and his parenting. And he, just a few months ago, I'll leave you with this. In fact, probably a year ago, he said, John, we got to do a podcast together. And I said, there's no way. Like, it just doesn't fit into my time and my family, and not sure how it fits into my brand or anything. And a few weeks later, maybe a couple months later, he sent me the outline of the first 3 episodes and said, you need to be here this day, and we're going to record these 3 episodes. And so sure enough, that happened. Maybe he'll tell you a little bit more about the GOAT Consulting podcast, because we're having a lot of fun doing that. But in addition to all of that, I think I mentioned he's a professor at MTSU, and Colby, just one of the best folks I know. So it's an honor to have you here. We're so grateful and appreciate you joining us today.
Well, John, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I know that it's a challenging time at 4:30 on a Wednesday in the middle of one of the most challenging years of our lives. And I appreciate even that Chip Bratton has stopped by from his busy schedule, class of 2016 and a University of Georgia grad, to spend time with us as well. You know, I want to make it impactful for everyone, and I want to go fast. And to do that, I want to start here. And more interaction to me is where we want to try to get to. So you throw it at me. I have ADD. So the more that I get and the more multitasking I can have, the better off I think things will be. John did say that I'm a college professor, and we'll start with this. Y'all know the joke, right? What are the saying about college professors? Those who can do, And those who can't, whoever answers it first gets a free book. Those who can't, I'm waiting on the edge of my seat. Those who can do and those who can't. We got to teach. There it is, Sydney Ball. Just, you get to pick. And listen, here's what I say, Sydney, about my books. I think they're awesome. I wrote them. But here's what I know, the covers are amazing. So judge the book by its cover, and you can either pick one on personal branding called Me, How to Sell Who You Are, What You Do, and Why You Matter to the World, or this one, Zebras and Cheetahs, and it's on growth, and it's lime green. The cover's really, really cool. They look great on a coffee table. So you let John know or Lynn know, and we'll get you a book to Sydney for that answer. Those who can do and those who can't teach. That's what was said to me early on in my career. And I come from teachers who taught me that the way you take on the world is to become an educator and marry an educator and educate other people. And that works until you want things like lifestyle and freedom. And I think part of what happens in our lives is that we have to go through, especially in a year like this year, we have to go through stages of reinvention. And so I spend a lot of time on my whiteboard, and I read things and I listen to things, and then I'll write it down. And I wrote this down, and this is where we'll start today. But if you can do and teach, you get paid for your value and not your time. And I think we live in an economy today that says that we're commanded to do and teach. You know, Drucker said it best when he said, we live in a knowledge-based economy, and it commands that we do two things. Number one, understand and articulate your value. Understand and articulate your value. And then number two, put yourself in a position to use it. And so today, this presentation is about the intersection of personal relationships and personal brands. And to me, that's no different than understanding what your value is, articulating it, and putting yourself in a position to use it. So I want to open this back up to the floor and see if we can give away another book. We throw around words like personal brand all the time. And we talk about, you got to be different. You got to be different. People say, hey, you got to be different. We have entire conferences around what does it mean to be different? What does somebody think that a personal brand is? What is your definition of a personal brand? Before I go into that, what's your definition of a personal brand? And I'll wait for a second to see if we can get some interaction here. And while you're thinking about that, here's the way that I do my presentations. I do my presentations in very short, powerful, impactful, emotional sentences, frameworks, to put you in a position where you can take short notes and then walk back into your classroom, into your life, into your boardroom, into your relationships, and use those in moments that matter the most to you. And so we don't have people talking about what this may be. You may be stumped, so I'm just going to give you something simple. And I speak the way that Hemingway writes. And Hemingway, he wrote the shortest story in the history of mankind. It's For Sale, Baby Shoes, Never Worn. And when I read that, I thought to myself, what a great way to communicate with other people. Speak in very short, powerful, simple ideas. And to me, a brand is a promise delivered in an experience. A brand is a promise that's delivered in an experience. And a personal brand is the meaning, makeup, and message of that brand and that promise. Does that resonate with you, that a brand is a promise that's delivered in an experience? What I hope it makes you ask yourself is, what is your promise? What is your promise, and how do you deliver it? What is your promise to other people, and how do you deliver it? I think another piece to personal branding that I think is interesting is that if you look at all of us, what happens is this, is that we have a set of experiences, and those experiences shape our stories. Those stories create our identity. Our identity drives our behavior, and that behavior defines the outcomes that we create. So if you're looking for a place to start to build your personal brand, then I think it starts with asking, what is the promise? What is the promise that I give to other people? And then how do I help them? How do I deliver that? How do I deliver that to other people? What is your promise? How do you deliver it? And to me, that's broken down and based on your own experiences that shape your stories, that create your identity, that drives your behavior and ultimately your outcome. In the strange world of 2020, my son Jack has turned 18. I've taken one breath, and now he's 18 and graduating from high school and going to college. And like many of you, do we have anybody in the audience whose kids are headed to college age, close, worried about the ACT, know what they made on the ACT, and worried about what their kids are going to make on the ACT? If we have any of those people in the house, that is what was going on in my life in 2020. My son had taken the ACT 4 different times and scored a 23 every time. And so he came back to me and he said, Dad, there we go. Brian Evans said, how others see you would describe you when you're not present. Cool. All right. That's a good place to start. And so he said, Dad, this is what my son Jack said to me. Remember what I talked about, how your experiences shape your story. He said, I've heard that if you take the ACT in a small town, that you can get a better score. And I laughed. And I said, Jack, come on now, think through this. Think about what you're saying to me. And he said, no, it's true. I've heard that from several of my friends, and it happened for them, and I want to sign up to take it in a small town. So he signed up to take the ACT in Tullahoma, Tennessee. And I said, well, if you're going to spend the time to do that, what you really need to do, if you want to get a higher score, is get a coach. Get somebody that can specifically show you a way to systematically and intentionally put together a plan to be successful in the ACT. And so he sought out a coach. He found one. We put him in a position. He took the coaching and he went to Tullahoma, and this small town in Tullahoma, he made a 30 on his ACT. And I was here with him at home when it happened, and he jumped out of his seat and he said, Dad, I made a 30 on the ACT. Wow, I couldn't believe it. And I said, are you sure that's right? Let me check to see what that record looks like. What it made me think about is 2 things that make up part of my personal brand and ultimately now make up part of his personal brand. The first is that I think that we're in a coaching revolution that says that you are a coach, you have a coach, or you don't want to be coached. And if you don't want to be coached, then you're going to be left behind. And so he sought out the coach who intentionally gave him a plan that said, if you go through these coaching sessions, that I will increase your score, you will increase your score by 5 to 7 points. And then the second is that to see the difference in his confidence because of that experience that now becomes part of his story and his identity is something that ultimately is a powerful takeaway for all of us in terms of how we build personal brands. Now, to get to the end of that story, I said, Jack, do you think you can make a 32? Because that's where the real money's at. And he said, no, Dad, it's 30 is going to be the best it's going to be. And so I share that with you to think about where are your stories and your moments of struggle, and how can you tell them in simple, powerful, and easy ways, for sale, baby shoes never worn, that get people to see you for who you really are. I tell a lot of stories around my son and my kids because I think they're simple and powerful stories to understand. And probably one of my favorite stories to tell about personal branding, promise that's delivered in experience, is that both my kids were able to have a teacher in Rutherford County at Siegel Elementary named Mr. Rich. And Mr. Rich showed up every day to his classroom that he called the Rock, with overalls, a white shirt, and tan steel toe work boots. And so he called his classroom the Rock, and he had a set of rules for each child that they had to learn while they were there. Number 11 was a good kid takes care of himself and a great kid takes care of other people. And in the back of Mr. Rich's classroom, there is a picture of his grandfather blown up, and he'd taken it and he took a yellow highlighter and he drew a halo on top of it. And he said to the kids, he said, "This is Angel Bob. He watches over this classroom. If you do something good, you may get a letter in the mail from Angel Bob." So my son, who was 5 or 6 at the time, went to the mailbox every day looking for that letter from Angel Bob. And finally in March, he got it and he opened it up, and it was a form letter. Obviously he didn't know that, but the form letter said, "Dear," and there was a line that said "Jack." And it said, "I saw you helping with a line, Billy. A good kid takes care of himself. A great kid takes care of other people. Keep being a great kid." A personal brand is about a promise that's delivered in an experience, and having the ability to know what the promise is. And for Mr. Rich, the promise was that he's going to set expectations, and then he's going to deliver that through his classroom, is a great example for all of us about how to tell stories and how to build a personal brand in such a way that other people want to listen. I'll stop for a second and see what you think, or if you have questions about that idea of brand being promised, delivered, and experience. What are some of your favorite brands, and what makes them some of your favorite brands? Promise, deliver, and experience. Yes, Chick-fil-A. Brian, we'll talk about Chick-fil-A, Amazon, Costco, Chick-fil-A. We have 2 Chick-fil-A's here in the big city of Murfreesboro. Costco is amazing. You can spend a whole Sunday there, Saturday. You can spend a weekday there. Southwest Airlines, consistency, fun and love. Yep. Yeah, so it's easy when we start thinking about our favorite brands to there are exotic places in the world I would go to. Thank you, John. Yes, for that. Yeah, so when we start thinking about personal brand, so what is it about Chick-fil-A? What is it about REI? Yeah, to go outdoors. What is it about Southwest that makes them so amazing? Yeah, everybody says it's my pleasure. We'll talk about that here in a second. See, because here's Chico's. Lynn loves Chico's. Here's what I think. Here's what I think. And thank you for your interaction. I was starting to get worried about myself out here all alone. I think that in the intersection of personal relationships and personal brands is this thing called emotional intelligence. Customer service is premier at all. Yes, Chip Bratton says customer service is premier. But see, Chip, it's more than just customer service. And I think we've evolved past that. And so I want to walk you through an idea that that I think will resonate with you. So we get this idea first that a brand is a promise that's delivered an experience. We get this idea that our experiences shape our stories drive our identity. Identity creates behavior and outcomes. So you're asking yourself, how can I build an identity in a world of sameness? And so when we start talking about personal brands, everybody wants to talk about customer service experiences like Southwest, like Chick-fil-A, like Amazon, like REI. And so as a kid growing up, and I grew up with a stepdad. He took my life over when I was 1. It's part of my personal brand. It's part of my story. It's part of my experience and part of my identity, and certainly shapes my behavior and outcome. But his name's Wayne Williams. And what I went through was the Wayne Williams School for Better Living and Better People. And part of that was on Sundays, you would sit in front of the TV and listen and watch 60 Minutes. And that became part of his continuous improvement program. Now stay with me, because this is going to make sense once we start talking about these brands: promise, experience. And so that tradition continues on today with my son, Jack, and my daughter, MB, when I can get her to sit down and watch it. But we were watching it recently, and I love Anderson Cooper. I love the way he interviews people, because he'll get right in the middle of it with somebody. He'll feel like he's crawling into your soul. You can feel it and you don't know what to do about it. And he's interviewing the guy that started Shake Shack. And he's talking to him about Shake Shack and how he came up with the idea and looking at his background and how he innovated. And this was a guy that saw no smoking in restaurants and bars as the future. He saw small plates as the future. He saw tip included in building this idea of hospitality included in the future. And so what they asked him, what Anderson asked him that I thought was so powerful, and it speaks to what the responses that I've gotten here. He said, is it about the experience? And he said, it's more than just the experience. And this is where I think you have to get to when you start thinking about building a personal brand. He said, we teach our people that everyone that walks through our door has a sign that says, I want to be made to feel important about X. And it's our job through empathy, connection, vulnerability to figure out what X is, how brightly the sign is lit, and how big the font is. And to me, that is a great example of how you take building personal relationships and building personal brands and connect them in the middle. Everyone is wearing a sign that says, I want to be made to feel important about X. And on that sign is font. You have to decide how big the font is, how brightly it's lit, and what they're ultimately trying to communicate to you. What I call that is, and what my favorite author says about that, Joe Calloway, is this idea of being the best at what matters most. Being the best at what matters most. And that's part of how you can, if you want, build a personal brand. What I think he's saying is that each one of us have unique perspective, how we see what we do, unique education, how we know what we do, and unique experience, how we deliver what we do. And the more you can crystallize those three things, like Mr. Rich did when he said that he has a classroom called The Rock and that Angel Bob watches over it, and that there's rules that everybody has to follow. And number 11 says a good kid takes care of himself and a great kid takes care of other people. The more that you can get to this idea of understanding your perspective, education, and experience, and then connect it to what matters most to other people, that's when you can really start to get some traction on your personal brand. Look no further than Johnny Cash and the language and the music and the perspective that he gave to other people in every one of his songs. You're on mute.
Colby, can I throw something in here?
Yeah, man.
I feel like I'm good at interrupting you lately.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that I've heard you, I don't know that you necessarily have pointed this out, but I think one of the things that I've connected today and previously that you're so good at in personal branding is storytelling, and how you tell stories is directly tied to your personal brand. And
Yeah.
I think you do that well. Really, everything you've shared here today is a story, has a story behind it, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk maybe a little bit more about that?
Well, let's start with a framework, John. That's a really good question. You just had somebody run by you there in the background, but let's talk about a framework that I think helps me do that. And I think everything, again, for sale baby shoes, never worn, keep everything in frameworks because they provide structure, predictability, and efficiency. And if you read Heath and Heath's book, Made to Stick, one of the frameworks that I think is so powerful that that they talk about in that book. And in the book, the idea around the book is what ideas make it to the top and what other ideas don't. And the framework that they use is simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional stories. Simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional, stories. And if you think about the Mr. Rich story,
Can you
the
say that
simple-
again? Simple.
yeah, simple. The formula, the framework's called success. Simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional stories. And what I would challenge the audience to think about, let's think about the big rocks to the small rocks. The big rocks is we all want a personal brand. There's books that have been written about it, but yet nobody can still tell you how to do it, or you can't figure out how to do it. I think it starts with understanding that it's about two things first: promise, deliver, and experience. What is your promise? How do you deliver it? The second, from there, is the framework of experiences create stories, stories create identity. One of the things we know, John, is that identity capital begets identity capital. If you want identity capital, the first thing you got to do is get around people that have it. Experience, story, identity, then that identity shapes your behavior and drives your outcome. So that's big picture. Small picture is if you're thinking about where you want to start, and this is how I came up with doing this, is 10 years ago, I was watching a movie about Seinfeld. Maybe it's 8 years ago, but it's been a while. And he went back into the New York nightclubs and tried to find the success that he found before. And what surprised him was how hard it was. But the interesting takeaway for me when I was watching that movie is that he had a piece of paper and he had written down on that piece of paper one-word vignettes. And those one-word vignettes were his act, were the 10 stories that he was going to unpack to the audience, depending on the energy that they gave to him. And so I asked myself, what are the 10 stories that I need to come up with that are simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, and emotional, that connect with other people in such a way that they truly understand my personal brand and want to have a connection with me, a meaningful connection. I think that we live, you and I have talked about this, but I think we live in the most connected, less relational time period in the history of the world. And if we know that that's a challenge, that we're more connected and less relational, and that we all agree that we get things done. Does anybody not agree that we don't get things done through personal relationships? Everything that I've ever gotten done that's meaningful in my life has happened in a relationship, through a relationship with other people. And so if you understand those ideas, and then you start asking yourself from the emotional intelligence standpoint, which I think is what connects personal brands and personal relationships. I think it's the emotional intelligence, and we don't need to make emotional intelligence too complicated. Start with self-awareness. Having self-awareness when you walk into the room, being aware of what you say and your behavior, how it impacts other people, how it impacts yourself, and how their behavior impacts you. And then start to ask yourself, everybody in here is wearing a sign that says, I want to be made to feel important about X. And by the way, I don't think that's a new idea. I don't think that it came from the guy that started Shake Shack. I think that that idea was developed a long time ago in Mary Kay Cosmetics. I have read, I can't verify because I can't find something that historically will prove that, but I have read different articles that have said that she said, we're starting this company based on this simple idea is that everybody in the world today wants to be made to feel important about something, and we're going to build a business, a product that delivers on that, as well as understand what is important to them. And so John, as we start to take it down to the ground here, and I'll leave some time here for questions, understanding that idea of being the best at what matters most, which is what Calloway says. It's my favorite book that he's written. And thinking about looking at people and saying they have a sign on them, and what does that sign trying to say to you? It reminds me of a story, and it's where I go get my tires here in Middle Tennessee, in Murfreesboro. And I think it's probably a place where a lot of people go get their tires. But when my confidence is low, I don't come home. I go to Discount Tires because one of the things that Discount Tires does that nobody else will do when you go to Discount Tires. Do we have anybody that's a Discount Tire fan that's had the similar experience? Any takers on what happens when you pull into the car? John Byers says yes. Anybody else? Ted, he's had a great experience. Yeah, well, what they do that's better than anybody else to me is they run to the car. They run to the car. When I pull in to Discount Tires, they run to the car. Mr. Jubenville, you're back again. You need another set of tires? Jack need another set of tires? And so I asked myself, who taught them that? How did they figure that out? Yeah, Dave, they attack you when they get there, basically. Yes, Dave, that's right. That is right. They run to the car. And so I asked myself, who taught them that? How did they develop that as part of their brand and as part of their culture? And I don't think that it comes from the top. I don't. I think there's three people that are sitting around a car all day, sitting around the water cooler after working all day, and they're tired and they got grease on their face. And they say, we sell tires. There's good, better, and the best. They're round, they have a hole in the middle. How can we do it better? And I think the guy that's probably the most tired that day, that's worked the hardest, he says, I don't know, maybe we can run to the car or something. Maybe we can demonstrate to the customer that in the moment, they are the most important thing to me. And so when you think about wanting to build a personal brand that creates that level of stickiness that you want, I think it starts with unique perspective, education, and experience. And if that's too conceptual for you, then start here and say, what is it that I do in the moment to other people that demonstrates to them that they are the most important thing to me? If you'll start there and work your way back to your promise and your experience, I think you'll get a whole lot closer to where you want to go in terms of how you build your personal brand. So John, I'll put a pause right there. And I want to be respectful of people's time. And if you want to open it up to questions, I'm happy to do it. And we'll take it from there.
Yeah, let's do that. Obviously the chat has been working. So
yeah. They attack you. Dave said they attack you when you get to there, basically. Ted likes the free flat tire repair, even if he didn't buy them from you. But I think it's just such a great story, a simple story to understand. They run to the car.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that I've also heard you share too, and around some of the companies that folks all brought up here, I mean, what those folks do better than anything else is develop a connection, right?
Absolutely.
That's really what it is. Like,
yeah.
I love Chick-fil-A. I as I mentioned right there, like there are exotic places in the world I would go to second to Costco. I love it. And they have developed that connection to me where, like, if Chick-fil-A was running the election, we would have known who the president was like within hours of voting closing on the West Coast. If they were running the COVID testing, like there'd be no lines.
No.
They developed a connection in a way like I want to go out and market for them.
Yeah. Well,
Colby, you went on mute by accident, I guess.
They demonstrate to the customer that they're the
back on mute again.
You there?
Yeah.
They demonstrate to the customer that in the moment that they're the most important thing to them. I still remember when the kids were small, we went to the Chick-fil-A here, and there was somebody standing out in the rain with a umbrella, walking people to and from their car at a fast food restaurant, because they saw that as a way to make the experience better. And I think that underscores the idea. If over here you've got personal brand, and over here you've got personal relationships, and then what is that ties it together? That emotional intelligence that ties that together. To me, the simple way to look at it is, what are you demonstrating to others that in the moment that they're the most important thing to you? Figure out what that is, and work your way back to either the personal brand and frameworks that we've used, and we don't have enough time to talk about personal relationships, but you can work your way from one end of the spectrum to the other to start to really create some traction for yourself than just saying, hey, I know I got to be different. I got to have a personal brand.
So Lisa asked a moment ago to repeat the success acronym, and it looks like Ted was taking notes earlier, or just it immediately imprinted on his brain because he rattled it off
Yes,
perfectly. I think, Colby, you may want to check that.
that's right. Yeah. Simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional stories. Now, the cool thing is, John, they don't have to read the book. They got everything they need to know from He Made the Stick.
Yeah. Here's a question. So a lot of the folks that are listening, chiming in here, are in some kind of leadership role
Mm-hmm.
and in life, family, business, in some way around relationships.
Yep.
And you mentioned this earlier, but or alluded to this, but how do you, as from a leadership perspective, I think it starts at the hiring process, the training process, the everyday culture you build. But like Chick-fil-A, like from top to bottom, everybody says it's my pleasure.
Yeah.
Everybody delivers the service that Lynn talks about, where she got, you know, catered this morning by Chick-fil-A, and the person that came in, they showed up early, they labeled the meals. I mean, it was just it's above and beyond, but that's the culture they set. So from a leadership perspective, how do you get that kind of buy-in with your team, and how have you seen that done?
Well, I think the easiest way is this way, is the buy-in. You know, I'll use somebody that I know that you love, Nick Saban. He's the head coach at the University of Alabama.
We have a love-hate relationship.
Yes, but he said it, he was interviewed by Armin Katayan on 60 Minutes, and the title of the piece, again, I'm referencing 60 Minutes, was The Perfectionist. And Katayan says to Saban when he's interviewing him, he says, you know, you're really hard on these kids. And you can tell Saban gets visibly upset about this. You know, he said, no, I don't think that's right. I don't think we're hard on kids. He said, we have a set of standards. That standards creates the buy-in. That buy-in drives the chemistry. Very much like Mr. Rich, and he has a set of rules for the rock that Angel Bob oversees. I think it starts, if you want to create buy-in and chemistry, John, which is what that was your question, I think it starts with getting really clear about what the expectations and the standards are. One of the things that he references to make that a point is he says that they're beating Notre Dame, Alabama's beating Notre Dame by 3 or 4 touchdowns in the championship game, and the center and the quarterback are getting a fight with each other because they both think they're calling the right play and they both think the other people are wrong, but they're up by 4 touchdowns and they can't figure the interviewer can't figure out why they just be mad. Why wouldn't they just be happy they're winning?
Right.
And that's part of the standards and the buy-in and the chemistry. He said, that's what you want. We teach all our players to play every play like it has a life and a history of its own. Getting language, John, getting language to that point where it's that clear is the first step to creating the buy-in. People, your language and the words that you choose, people make choices in that language, whether or not they're going to continue to spend time in that moment with you.
We got a question that came in. I think Chip's working one up, by the way. He told me he's got a list of about 10 he's trying to whittle down. So we're going to hear from Chip here in just a minute.
Okay.
But one that came in was I really like this question, by the way. It says, what podcasts or books would you recommend for leadership development?
Yeah. Well, John and I just launched a podcast. Chip asked about the GOAT, called the GOAT Consulting Podcast. And this is something that we have been going back and forth probably for about a year. And it's amazing that there's a saying that says the right man or woman with the right message at the right time can change the world. And I think that that's something that I certainly subscribe to. And you got to get the right people involved. But we do this podcast and we call it a quick cast. It's 24 minutes or a car ride to work and a car ride home. And what we really wanted to focus on was just the blocking and tackling, take one idea, make it really simple, very much like the way that we had the presentation today, and then serve it up in a way that people can get it. We like to think that we're a lot like Waffle House, that we serve it up in a way that people can get it. And then the two other frames that we use when we tell stories about, let's say the idea is confidence, that we focus on this frame of, in our 20s, they teach us to get in the game. In our 30s, they teach us to stay in the game. In our 40s, we try to stay in the game because those 30-year-olds are so damn good. In our 50s, what the research says is we ask ourselves, what is it that I really want? And when I heard that, when I read that, those ideas, I wrote them down, and I think there's a whole lot of truth, and that resonates with almost every person that's at a different stage of life. And so getting clear, if you can say, this is what I really want out of my experience, either as the leader or follower, I think is really, really, really important. Serving up in a way that people can get it is really, really important. And then the last part, the GOAT part, and that's with the third person that helps put the podcast together, Tyler Burnett with GOAT Turf. But that's his idea around the greatest of all time. And what that means in sports is this idea of a person that is recognized for their greatness in sports entertainment, but what they do is they elevate other people around them. And in business, it's much like what we're talking about today. They have a personal brand based on perspective, education, and experience. And what they do gives them energy, and it gives other people energy, and it creates new levels of challenge and new levels of result. And so when I think about leadership, I think understanding those three ideas are critical to the kind of leader that you want to be.
I know I'm not the esteemed speaker here on the day.
Yes, you are.
I would add, Brene Brown launched a podcast, actually two different podcasts this year, but one more recently, like in the last month and a half, called the Dare to Lead podcast. And it's a great specifically around leadership guest she has on there. It's really fantastic. And obviously it comes from the book that she wrote, Dare to Lead. I would recommend.
Well, and then the other two, certainly John Lee Dumas, Entrepreneur on Fire, is probably the most downloaded podcast in the country around leadership, entrepreneurship. And then there's one recently that I've found called The Art of Coaching. And he goes really in depth on topics, complex topics, and then tries to make them simple along the way. So The Art of Coaching is something that I've recently found that I really liked. All my books, I'm a big Calloway subscriber, Joe Calloway. I read Category of One many years ago, How to Transcend Commodity and Defy Comparison. And I wish that I had read that book prior to writing the book that I wrote, because my writing style today is mirrored after his, because I just think he's such a great writer. I mean, he keeps it very simple and to the point and very powerful. And so any book by Joe Calloway, I think you'll find it's helpful because it keeps it really, really simple and impactful.
Cool. Anybody else want to chime in here before we wrap it up? Lynn?
Well, I'm going to go check with, how do you like that picture? I turned on my light. So I'm red now. I'm going to check with Angel Bob myself.
You should. You should.
So thank you so much. This has been really, really, I was really tired at the end of the day with all my teenagers, but this has really kind of inspired me. So it perked me up. So I really appreciate your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if my speaker may not be working. John, can you hear me?
Yep, you're good. Chip, one last question here before we wrap it up. Chip asked, what leader in the world, business or otherwise, inspires you today? You can't say Saban. I mean, Chip and I are Georgia guys. Don't even go there. So just move on from that. And you're on mute. Colby, you're on mute.
Now, can you hear me?
Yep.
It said the host muted me, John. This is going to sound self-serving, but the relationships, the leaders that I look to the most are the people that I spend the most time with, the people that are on the front lines, the people that I was with Tyler Burnett, the guy that I do with the podcast with today, and he got off the phone and he was visibly upset, and I said, what is wrong with you? And he said, that guy just doesn't understand the passion that I have for what I'm doing. And I thought, to be 31 again, and to be bad about something like that, but to have that desire to truly go out and lead other people, that to me, meeting those kind of people, the people that we have right here in Middle Tennessee, in all the different industries that I work in, those people, to me, we've got some of the greatest leaders right around here. So I don't look to the national spotlight to find those, because I think they're right here, and that's where I find the greatest relationships and connection.
That's great, and that's where we found you. So there you go.
That's right.
Colby, thanks for connecting with us here. Thanks for sharing your story and your life and your personal brand. I would encourage everybody here to link up with Colby via LinkedIn and connect with him that way. It will automatically elevate your own stock as he's done with me. So appreciate you, Colby. Thank you so much on behalf of Leadership Brentwood and the alumni and Sydney, who's currently in the current class here, and for the whole Williamson Chamber. We are fortunate to have such a rock star join us today. So thank you for being here, and appreciate everything.
Hey, and let's make sure, thank you, John. Thanks for making all this happen, and for the team for getting it set up. And let's make sure that we'll get Ted one of these books too. Okay. Since he was taking notes.
I love it. I love it. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Lynn, Nick. Appreciate you guys.
See you, JB.
Bye, guys.